I was drinking my morning coffee when I heard the sickening crunch of metal meeting wood, and looked out my kitchen window to see a silver Lexus embedded in what used to be my fence. The driver's door opened and out stepped Brenda Montgomery, the president of our Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association in Naperville, Illinois, clutching her phone like it was evidence of my guilt, rather than documentation of her complete failure to navigate a residential street. I knew right then that my peaceful Tuesday morning in February was about to become a nightmare. I grabbed my coat and rushed outside into the freezing air. Ice covered most of the street, something that happened every winter in the Chicago suburbs, but my driveway and walkway were perfectly cleared. The same could not be said for the public street where Brenda had apparently lost control of her vehicle. "Brenda, are you okay?" I called out, genuinely concerned despite knowing her reputation for turning every minor incident into a federal case. She spun around, her perfectly highlighted blonde hair whipping in the cold wind. At 47, she dressed like she was heading to a country club board meeting even at 8 in the morning. "Kyle Thompson, this is absolutely unacceptable. Your property was not properly maintained, and that is why this accident occurred." I stopped in my tracks, trying to process what she had just said. My fence, which had been standing peacefully minding its own business, was now split in half with her Lexus buried in the wreckage. Wooden posts jutted out at odd angles, and several sections of the white privacy fence lay crushed under her front bumper. "Brenda, you just crashed into my fence. Are you hurt? Should I call an ambulance?" "I am perfectly fine, no thanks to you," she snapped, her voice reaching that particular pitch that made dogs bark 3 streets over. "If you had properly salted the street in front of your property, this never would have happened." I blinked several times, certain I had misheard her. "The street? You mean the public street maintained by the city of Naperville? Do not play games with me, Kyle. Section 4.7 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that homeowners are responsible for maintaining safe conditions on and around their properties. That includes ensuring that the public right-of-way adjacent to your property is free from hazardous conditions. My neighbor, Richard Chen, had come out of his house and was recording the scene on his phone. He gave me a look that said he could not believe what he was hearing either. "Brenda, I cleared my driveway and my walkway. The city is responsible for the streets. You know that. Everyone in Illinois knows that." She jabbed a manicured finger in my direction. "I am the HOA president, and I am telling you that you are in violation. Expect a formal citation and a bill for damages. My car will need extensive repairs, and clearly, your fence will need to be replaced according to HOA standards, which I will personally ensure are met. Your car, you crashed into my fence because you failed to maintain safe conditions. I have half a mind to fine you for the fence being destroyed as well. It is certainly an eyesore now." I felt my blood pressure rising despite the cold. I had lived in Meadowbrook Hills for 3 years, and Brenda had been a thorn in my side for approximately 2 years and 11 months of that time. The first month had been blissful ignorance before I received my first violation notice for having my trash cans visible from the street 15 minutes after the designated pickup time. "I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone. "Excellent idea. They will document your negligence thoroughly." The Naperville Police Department arrived within 20 minutes. Officer Martinez stepped out of his patrol car and surveyed the scene with the weary expression of someone who had dealt with HOA disputes before. His partner, Officer Williams, began taking photos of the accident. "So, who wants to tell me what happened here?" Officer Martinez asked, pulling out his notepad. Brenda launched into her explanation before I could open my mouth. Officer, I was driving at a reasonable speed down this residential street when I hit an unexpected patch of ice directly in front of Mr. Thompson's property. As you can see, he has failed to salt the public right-of-way, creating a hazardous condition that caused me to lose control of my vehicle. I demand that he be cited for creating a public safety hazard. Officer Martinez looked at me. Sir, is your name Kyle Thompson? Yes, officer, I'm the homeowner here. I was inside having coffee when I heard the crash. My driveway and walkway are completely clear, as you can see. The street is the city's responsibility, not mine. Did you witness the accident? I saw the aftermath immediately. I heard the crash and came right out. Officer Williams walked over from examining the tire marks on the street. Martinez, the skid marks start about 40 feet back. She was coming down the street at a pretty good speed based on the length of the slide and the impact damage. Brenda's face flushed red. I was going the speed limit. Madam, this is a residential zone. The speed limit is 25. Based on the damage to the fence and your vehicle, I'd estimate you were going at least 35 to 40 miles per hour when you hit the ice. That is absolutely not true. This man's negligence caused this accident, and I will not be slandered. Officer Martinez held up his hand. Madam, I need you to calm down. Mr. Thompson has no legal obligation to salt the public street. That responsibility lies with the city. Now, I'm going to need to see your license, registration, and insurance information. I watched as Brenda's face went through several shades of red before settling on a color that reminded me of a tomato about to burst. She stomped back to her Lexus, which was still firmly wedged into my fence, and retrieved her documents from the glove compartment. While Officer Martinez processed her information, Officer Williams approached me. Sir, do you have homeowner's insurance? Yes, I do. You'll want to file a claim for the fence damage. Based on what I'm seeing here, the driver will be at fault. We'll provide you with a copy of the accident report for your insurance company. What about her claim that I'm responsible for not salting the street? Officer Williams shook his head. That's not how it works. Property owners are responsible for their sidewalks in most Illinois municipalities, but streets are always the city's responsibility. Even if there was some HOA rule about it, which would be unusual and likely unenforceable, it wouldn't override state and local traffic laws. She lost control of her vehicle and struck your property. She's at fault. The relief I felt was short-lived. I knew Brenda well enough to know that facts, logic, and actual laws meant very little to her when she had decided someone was in violation of her interpretation of the HOA rules. Officer Martinez returned and handed Brenda a citation. Madam, I'm citing you for failure to maintain control of your vehicle. You'll need to contact your insurance company about the damage to both your car and Mr. Thompson's fence. This is outrageous. I am the HOA president, and I am telling you that he is responsible for this accident. Madam, your HOA rules do not supersede Illinois traffic law. You were driving too fast for conditions, lost control, and damaged private property. If you continue to argue with me, I can add additional citations. Brenda snatched the ticket from his hand. You will be hearing from my attorney, and Kyle, you will be receiving a formal notice of violation from the HOA board by the end of the day. She called a tow truck to extract her Lexus from my fence, which took another hour and caused even more damage to my property. The entire time, she stood there in her designer coat, talking loudly on her phone about incompetent police officers and negligent homeowners. Every neighbor on the street had come out to watch the spectacle, and I could see several of them recording on their phones. Richard approached me as the tow truck finally pulled Brenda's car free. Kyle, man, that was insane. I got the whole thing on video if you need it. Thanks, Richard. I have a feeling I'm going to need all the evidence I can get. She's really going to try to blame you for this. You heard her. She's probably drafting the violation notice right now. Richard shook his head. The HOA board meeting is next week. I'll make sure people know what really happened here. I spent the rest of the day calling my insurance company, getting estimates for fence repairs, and documenting everything with photos and videos. The damage was extensive. 3 sections of privacy fence, each 8 feet long, were completely destroyed. 2 fence posts were snapped at the base, and a third was leaning at a dangerous angle. The total estimate came to $3,200. My insurance agent, a friendly woman named Patricia, assured me that based on the police report, Brenda's insurance would be responsible for covering the damages. We'll file the claim against her policy. With the police report clearly indicating she was at fault, this should be straightforward. However, if her insurance denies the claim for any reason, we'll cover it under your policy and then subrogate against her insurance. Have you dealt with HOA situations before? Patricia laughed. Oh, honey, I've been selling homeowners insurance in the Chicago suburbs for 20 years. HOA disputes are half my business. Don't worry, we'll handle this. I had just hung up with Patricia when my doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was Derek Sanders, the HOA's designated process server, holding an official-looking envelope. Kyle, I'm sorry about this, but I have to deliver this to you officially, Derek said, looking genuinely apologetic. He was one of the few reasonable people on the HOA board, often voting against Brenda's more ridiculous proposals. I took the envelope. Already. The accident happened 6 hours ago. Brenda called an emergency board meeting at noon. She demanded we issue an immediate violation notice. I voted against it for what it's worth, but she got Barbara and Linda to vote with her. Barbara Huntsinger and Linda Peterson were Brenda's loyal followers on the 5-person board. They voted yes on anything Brenda proposed, no matter how ridiculous. The 5th board member, Tom Wu, was currently on vacation in Hawaii, leaving Brenda with her 3-to-1 majority on any vote Derek opposed. I opened the envelope and read the notice. It was even worse than I had expected. Violation notice. Property owner Kyle Thompson, 847 Maple Ridge Drive, is hereby notified of the following violations of Meadowbrook Hills HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Violation 1. Failure to maintain safe conditions on property and adjacent right-of-way as required by Section 4.7, resulting in property damage and safety hazard. Fine, $500. Violation 2. Damaged fence creating unsightly appearance in violation of Section 3.2 regarding property maintenance and curb appeal. Fine, $300 per day until repaired to HOA standards. Violation 3. Failure to properly respond to an HOA president during an official inspection in violation of Section 8.4 regarding cooperation with HOA officials. Fine, $250. Total fines, $1,050, plus $300 per day beginning February 18, 2026. Payment must be received within 30 days or further action will be taken, including potential lien placement on property. I read it 3 times to make sure I was not hallucinating. Derek, this is absolutely insane. She crashed into my fence and now she's fining me for it. I know, Kyle. I argued against every single point. I told them the police report clearly states she was at fault. I explained that property owners are not responsible for city streets. I even read them the actual text of Section 4.7, which is about maintaining landscaping and preventing drainage issues, not salting public streets. But Brenda insisted on her interpretation, and Barbara and Linda backed her up. What's this about not properly responding to her during an inspection? She crashed into my fence. Apparently, you were disrespectful when questioning her authority as HOA president. Her words, not mine. I felt like I was living in an alternate reality where logic and reason had been completely abandoned. What do I do here, Derek? You have the right to appeal any violation notice. There will be a hearing at next week's board meeting, February 19th. You can present your case, including the police report, witness statements, and any other evidence. The board will vote on whether to uphold or dismiss the violations. And Brenda gets to vote on her own case. Derek looked uncomfortable. Technically, yes. There's nothing in our bylaws that requires recusal for conflicts of interest. It's something I've tried to change, but I've never had the votes. So she crashes into my fence, fines me for her own accident, and then gets to judge whether those fines are valid. I'm really sorry, Kyle. For what it's worth, Tom gets back from Hawaii on the 18th. He'll vote with me to dismiss this nonsense. But we'd still need one more vote to actually overturn it. After Derek left, I sat in my living room staring at the violation notice. I had heard horror stories about HOAs, but I never imagined I would be living through one. When I bought my house in Meadowbrook Hills, the subdivision seemed perfect. Well-maintained homes, good schools nearby, friendly neighbors. The HOA fees were reasonable at $200 a month, and the covenants seemed straightforward. No commercial vehicles parked in driveways, lawns kept mowed, houses painted in approved colors. Standard stuff. Then Brenda Montgomery had been elected HOA president 2 years ago, and everything changed. She interpreted every rule in the most restrictive way possible. She created new subcommittees to monitor compliance. She instituted monthly property inspections. She increased the fine schedule 3 times. The neighborhood Facebook group had become a war zone of residents complaining about ridiculous violations and Brenda defending her actions as necessary to maintain property values. I spent the evening researching Illinois HOA law. What I found was both encouraging and disturbing. HOAs in Illinois had significant power to enforce their rules, and even place liens on properties for unpaid fines. However, they were also bound by the Illinois Common Interest Community Association Act, which required them to follow proper procedures, act reasonably, and not enforce rules in an arbitrary or discriminatory manner. The law seemed clear that HOAs could not enforce rules that violated state or local laws. Since property owners were not legally responsible for salting public streets, Brenda's interpretation of Section 4.7 appeared to be unenforceable. The question was whether I would have to spend thousands of dollars on an attorney to prove that point. I called my cousin Jake, who was a real estate attorney in Chicago. After explaining the situation, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Kyle, let me make sure I understand this correctly. The HOA president crashed her car into your fence because she was speeding on an icy street, and now she's fining you for not salting that street. That's exactly what happened. I have the police report, witness videos, everything. And she's charging you $300 per day until the fence is repaired, starting in 4 days, yes, Jake whistled. That's aggressive even by HOA Karen standards. Okay, here's what you need to know. First, those fines are almost certainly unenforceable. Illinois law does not require property owners to maintain public streets. Even if the HOA bylaws said you had to, which I doubt they actually do when properly read, those bylaws cannot override state, and municipal law. Second, the daily fine schedule seems excessive and potentially punitive rather than compensatory, which is a violation of Illinois HOA law. Third, she has an obvious conflict of interest that would taint any board decision. So what should I do? Go to the hearing next week. Present your evidence calmly and professionally. Get copies of the police report, witness statements, videos, everything. If they uphold the fines, you send them a letter from an attorney, which I'm happy to write for you, explaining exactly why the fines are invalid, and that any attempt to collect them or place a lien will result in a lawsuit for abuse of process. Most HOAs back down at that point because they know they'll lose and end up paying your attorney fees. And if they don't back down, then we file suit and take them to court. Based on what you're telling me, you'd have a strong case not just to invalidate the fines but potentially to recover damages for harassment and emotional distress. Illinois courts have been willing to slap down overreaching HOAs, especially when board members are obviously acting out of personal interest rather than for the community's benefit. I felt slightly better after talking to Jake, but I still had to get through the next week knowing that Brenda was probably already spending my fine money in her imagination. The next morning, I woke up to find a brand new problem. Someone had left a notice on every door in the neighborhood. It was printed on official HOA letterhead. Important community safety notice. Residents are reminded that property maintenance is everyone's responsibility. Recent accidents in our community have highlighted the dangers of inadequate property maintenance, particularly during winter months. All homeowners are required to maintain safe conditions on their property and adjacent areas. Failure to do so puts our entire community at risk and will result in significant fines and penalties. Let's work together to keep Meadowbrook Hills safe and beautiful. It did not mention me by name, but the implication was crystal clear. Brenda was trying to turn the neighborhood against me by making it seem like I had somehow caused a safety hazard. My phone started ringing almost immediately. The first call was from my next-door neighbor, Susan Martinez, Officer Martinez's wife. "Kyle, please tell me you saw that ridiculous notice Brenda left on everyone's door. I'm looking at it right now. Miguel told me what really happened yesterday. He's furious that she's trying to spin the accident as your fault. He said the police report is very clear that she was speeding and lost control. She issued me violation notices totaling over $1,000, plus $300 a day starting Friday if my fence is not repaired." Susan gasped. "She cannot do that. She's the one who crashed into your fence. Apparently, she can do whatever she wants as HOA president. Not if the rest of us have anything to say about it. I'm calling everyone I know. This has gone too far." Over the next few hours, I received similar calls from a dozen neighbors. Richard Chen, who had recorded the accident, had already posted his video to the neighborhood Facebook group with a detailed explanation of what happened. The comments section was exploding with residents expressing outrage at Brenda's actions. But for every supporter, there was also someone defending Brenda. Barbara Huntsinger had commented multiple times about the importance of following HOA rules and respecting the board's authority. Linda Peterson chimed in about property values and community standards. Several other residents who were apparently in Brenda's social circle made vague comments about troublemakers and people who refused to be team players. The neighborhood was dividing into camps, and I was at the center of it. On Thursday morning, my insurance company called with an update. Brenda's insurance company, Midwest Mutual, had received the claim and was investigating. They had requested copies of the police report and photos of the damage. My agent, Patricia, said this was standard procedure and that approval would likely come within a week. I had also gotten 3 estimates for fence repair, all ranging from $3,000 to $3,500. The HOA covenants required that any fence repairs match the existing style and color, which was fine with me since I just wanted my fence to look like it had, before Brenda turned it into a sculpture of twisted wood and metal posts. Friday morning arrived, and with it came the start of the $300 per day fine period. I had not even been able to schedule the fence repair yet, since I was waiting for insurance approval. Most contractors were booking 2 to 3 weeks out anyway because of winter storm damage throughout the area. At precisely 9 a.m., my doorbell rang. It was Derek again, looking even more apologetic than before. Please tell me you're not here with more violation notices. Worse. Brenda wants to schedule an emergency property inspection for this afternoon at 2 p.m. An inspection of what? Your entire property. She's claiming that if you're negligent enough to cause a safety hazard that resulted in property damage, there may be other violations that need to be documented. Derek, she caused the property damage. I know that, Kyle. But she scheduled it as an official HOA inspection, and according to the covenants, homeowners are required to allow reasonable access for inspections with 24 hours notice. She's giving me 5 hours notice. She's calling it an emergency inspection based on safety concerns. Look, I'll be there as a board witness and I promise to document everything accurately. Don't give her any ammunition by refusing access. I wanted to refuse on principle, but Jake had warned me about giving the HOA any legitimate grounds for additional complaints. Fine. 2 p.m. But I want this on record as harassment. I don't disagree with you. I spent the next few hours making sure my property was absolutely spotless. I shoveled my driveway again, even though it did not need it. I checked that my trash cans were properly stored in my garage. I walked around my house 3 times looking for anything that could possibly be considered a violation. At exactly 2 p.m., 3 cars pulled up to my house. Brenda emerged from her rental car, a black BMW that her insurance had provided while her Lexus was being repaired. Barbara and Linda climbed out of their respective vehicles. Derek arrived a minute later in his pickup truck. "Good afternoon, Kyle," Brenda said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Thank you for allowing us access to your property for this important safety inspection." I was told I did not have much choice. All homeowners agree to periodic inspections when they purchase property in Meadowbrook Hills. It's part of the covenant you signed. She was right about that, though the covenant specified reasonable inspections with proper notice, not retaliatory examinations by someone who had crashed into my fence 3 days earlier. The 4 board members walked around my property like investigators at a crime scene. Brenda had a clipboard and was making notes constantly. Barbara took photos with her phone. Linda measured things with a tape measure, though I could not figure out what she was measuring or why. "Your mailbox is 16 inches from the curb," Linda announced. "The covenant specifies 12 to 18 inches, so you're compliant there." "Your house numbers are clearly visible and properly sized," Barbara noted, sounding almost disappointed. "They examined my gutters, my roof, my siding, my windows. They looked at my landscaping, even though everything was covered in snow. They checked that my exterior lights were working. They studied my satellite dish mounting. After 45 minutes, they gathered near their cars to confer." I stood on my porch with Derek, who had been documenting everything with his own camera. "They're not finding anything, are they?" I asked quietly. "Your property is cleaner and better maintained than 90% of the neighborhood, including Brenda's own house." "But that won't stop her from trying to find something." Brenda approached with her clipboard. "Mr. Thompson, we have identified several areas of concern, such as your fence is damaged and has not been repaired within 72 hours of the damage occurring, in violation of Section 3.2. Brenda, you damaged my fence. I'm waiting for your insurance to approve the claim. Your personal circumstances do not excuse violations of our covenants. Additionally, we noticed that your recycling bin was visible from the street through your garage window." "My recycling bin, that's in my closed garage. Bins must be stored completely out of sight per Section 5.8. If any part of a bin is visible from any public right-of-way, including through windows, it constitutes a violation," Derek interrupted. "Brenda, that's not what Section 5.8 says. It says bins can't be stored in areas visible from the street, meaning outside. Nothing about them being visible through windows." "That is your interpretation, Derek. As president, I have the authority to enforce these rules as I see fit to maintain community standards." "That's not how this works," Derek said, his frustration evident. "You can't just make up new interpretations whenever you want to fine someone." Brenda ignored him and continued reading from her clipboard. "We also observed that your lawn furniture is stored against the side of your house rather than in a shed or garage." "What lawn furniture?" Barbara held up her phone, showing a photo of 2 plastic Adirondack chairs stacked against the side of my house, barely visible behind the damaged fence. "Those chairs are on my own property, completely hidden from any street or neighboring view unless you trespass onto my property. Which, based on that photo angle, you did to take that picture. We have the right to inspect all areas of your property during official inspections," Brenda said. "Not without my accompaniment, you don't. I never gave you permission to go into my side yard," Linda jumped in. "We needed to properly document the full extent of the fence damage." "The fence damage you caused, Brenda. The fence damage that the police report clearly states you are at fault for." Brenda's face flushed. "Mr. Thompson, your continued hostile attitude toward the HOA board is noted and will be included in our report. You will receive formal violation notices for these new infractions within 24 hours." They left in a convoy of self-righteousness, and I stood there wondering how my life had turned into a Franz Kafka novel. Derek lingered behind. "Kyle, off the record, you need to go nuclear at the board meeting on Tuesday. Bring everything. Police reports, videos, witness statements, insurance documentation, photos. Bring an attorney if you can. Tom and I will vote to dismiss all of this, but we need to sway either Barbara or Linda to make it a majority. If enough residents show up to support you, it might pressure one of them to break ranks." "Do you really think that will work? Honestly, I don't know. Brenda has her claws deep into those two, but it's your best shot without going to court." That evening, I sat down and prepared my case like I was going to trial. I printed out the police report. I downloaded Richard's video and burned it to a DVD. I got written statements from Richard, Susan, and 2 other neighbors who had witnessed the accident and its aftermath. I compiled photos of my property before and after Brenda's inspection, showing that nothing had changed except the fence she had destroyed. I also did something else. I pulled out my copy of the HOA covenants and read through all 87 pages in detail. What I found was illuminating. Section 4.7, which Brenda had cited as the basis for her salting requirement, actually read, "Property owners shall maintain their lots in a clean and orderly condition, including proper drainage, landscaping, and prevention of soil erosion or debris accumulation that may negatively impact neighboring properties or common areas." Nothing about salting, nothing about public streets, nothing that could reasonably be interpreted to require maintaining city property. Section 3.2, regarding property maintenance, stated, property owners must maintain their homes and lots in good repair and attractive condition. This includes prompt repair of damage caused by weather, accidents, or normal wear and tear. Repairs must be completed within a reasonable time frame considering the nature and extent of the damage. Nothing about 72 hours. Nothing about daily fines starting immediately. The word reasonable was doing a lot of work there, and waiting for insurance approval before beginning repairs seemed extremely reasonable to me. Section 5.8, about storage, said, trash and recycling bins must be stored out of sight from public view, except on designated collection days. Bins may not be permanently stored in front yards or visible from street view. Again, nothing about visibility through garage windows. The clear intent was to prevent people from leaving bins on their front lawns or in their driveways, not to require that every window in someone's house be curtained in case a bin was stored inside. I felt my anger building as I realized that Brenda was not even enforcing the actual rules. She was making up her own interpretations and claiming presidential authority to do so. The question was whether the rest of the board would allow it. Saturday brought another surprise. I received a letter from a local attorney, Marcus Chen, Richard's cousin as it turned out. The letter was addressed to the Meadowbrook Hills HOA Board of Directors. This firm represents Kyle Thompson regarding recent violation notices issued by the HOA. Upon reviewing said notices and the underlying facts, it is clear that the violations are improperly assessed and unenforceable under Illinois law and the HOA's own governing documents. The violations stem from an accident caused by HOA President Brenda Montgomery, as documented in Naperville Police Report No. 2026, 18,472. Miss Montgomery lost control of her vehicle due to excessive speed and damaged Mr. Thompson's property. Any attempt to hold Mr. Thompson liable for Miss Montgomery's negligence is legally baseless and constitutes harassment. Furthermore, the interpretations of HOA covenant sections cited in the violation notices are inconsistent with the plain language of those provisions and appear to be applied in a discriminatory manner. We demand that all violation notices be withdrawn immediately and that no further retaliatory action be taken against Mr. Thompson. If these demands are not met, we will pursue all available legal remedies, including but not limited to filing suit for abuse of process, harassment, and violation of the Illinois Common Interest Community Association Act. Please govern yourselves accordingly. Richard had mentioned that his cousin was an attorney, but I had not asked him to get involved. Apparently, Richard had told Marcus what was happening, and Marcus had been outraged enough to offer his services. I called Richard. "Did you really have your cousin send that letter?" Marcus did it on his own after I told him what Brenda was doing. He said it was one of the most clear-cut cases of HOA abuse he had seen, and he wanted to help. He's not charging you anything. Consider it a neighborly favor. Richard, I don't know what to say. Say you'll let us help you fight this. Brenda has been out of control for 2 years. Someone needs to stand up to her, and this is the perfect opportunity. She literally crashed her car into your fence and is trying to bill you for it. If we don't stop her now, she'll just keep getting worse. Monday morning, I got a call from Midwest Mutual, Brenda's insurance company. The claims adjuster, a man named David Park, had reviewed all the evidence. "Mr. Thompson, I want to apologize for any delay in processing your claim. After reviewing the police report, photos, and witness statements, we are accepting full liability for the accident. Our insured was clearly at fault. We will be issuing payment for the full amount of your fence repairs based on your contractor estimate of $3,200. You should receive the check within 5 business days. That's great news, thank you. I also want you to know that we have documented the attempts by our insured to blame you for the accident. The police report is very clear about fault, and we have noted her statements as inconsistent with the facts. This will be reflected in her policy going forward. What David was politely saying was that Brenda's insurance rates were about to go up significantly, and if she had any future claims, her credibility would be questioned. I immediately called the fence contractor and scheduled the repair for the following Monday, exactly 1 week after the accident. Given that it was February in Illinois and I had to wait for insurance approval, I thought 1 week was extremely reasonable. Tuesday arrived, and with it came the HOA board meeting. The meetings were usually held in the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that contained a gym, a meeting room, and a kitchen. Typically, board meetings attracted maybe 10 residents plus the 5 board members. That night, over 80 people showed up. The meeting room could hold about 40 people comfortably. Residents were standing in the hallway, crowding into the kitchen area, and even standing outside in the cold so they could hear through the open door. The local newspaper, the Naperville Sun, had even sent a reporter after someone tipped them off about the dispute. I arrived at 7 p.m., 30 minutes before the meeting start time. Richard, Susan, and Marcus Chen were already there, along with dozens of other neighbors I knew by sight if not by name. Derek was setting up chairs while Tom Wu, freshly returned from Hawaii with a sunburn, was reviewing documents at the board table. Brenda arrived at 7:15 with Barbara and Linda flanking her like bodyguards. She stopped short when she saw the crowd. "What is all this?" she demanded. Derek looked up from arranging chairs. "A well-attended board meeting. Isn't this what we always wanted? Community engagement. This is highly irregular. I was not informed that so many people would be attending." Tom Wu spoke up. "Board meetings are open to all residents, Brenda. You know that." I, for one, am pleased to see this level of interest in community governance. Brenda looked like she wanted to cancel the meeting, but with the newspaper reporter there and dozens of witnesses, she could not back out without looking even worse. The meeting started at 7:30. Brenda called it to order and went through the standard opening procedures, approving the previous meeting's minutes and reviewing the financial report. She was clearly stalling, hoping people would get bored and leave. Nobody moved. Finally, she reached new business. "We have several items on tonight's agenda, including a discussion of recent property violations and an appeal of enforcement actions." I raised my hand. "I believe my appeal is on the agenda. You will be heard when I call for your case, Mr. Thompson." "Brenda, his case is the reason everyone is here," Tom said. "Let's just get to it." Brenda looked like she had bitten into a lemon. "Fine. Case 2026-47, appeal of violation notices issued to Kyle Thompson of 847 Maple Ridge Drive. Mr. Thompson, you have 15 minutes to present your appeal." I stood up and walked to the front of the room. Marcus had advised me to stay calm, factual, and professional. Let the evidence speak for itself. Thank you. Members of the board and fellow residents, I'm here tonight to appeal 3 violation notices that were issued to me last Tuesday, February 11th. These violations arose from an accident that occurred that morning when HOA President Brenda Montgomery lost control of her vehicle and crashed into my fence. I pulled out copies of the police report and handed them to each board member. This is the official police report from the Naperville Police Department. As you can see, Officer Martinez concluded that Miss Montgomery was driving too fast for conditions and was at fault for the accident. The report specifically notes that I have no legal obligation to salt the public street, which is maintained by the city. I continued. The first violation notice claims I failed to maintain safe conditions on my property and the adjacent right-of-way. However, as you can see from these photos taken that morning, my driveway and walkway were completely clear. The ice was on the public street, which is not my responsibility. I displayed the photos on the projector that Derek had set up. The images clearly showed my clean driveway and the icy street beyond. The second violation claims my damaged fence is an eyesore that must be repaired within 72 hours, or I'll be fined $300 per day. However, the fence was damaged by Miss Montgomery's vehicle. Her insurance company has accepted full liability and is paying for repairs. I have scheduled those repairs for next Monday, exactly 1 week after the accident, which seems very reasonable given that I had to wait for insurance approval. More photos appeared on the screen showing the damaged fence and the contractor estimate. The third violation claims I was disrespectful to an HOA president during an official inspection. However, there was no scheduled inspection that morning. Miss Montgomery crashed her car into my property, and I responded as anyone would by checking if she was injured and calling the police. I paused and looked directly at Brenda. What's really happening here is that Miss Montgomery caused property damage through her own negligence, and rather than taking responsibility, she's attempting to blame me by misinterpreting HOA rules. I have here the actual text of the covenant sections she cited. I read section 4.7, 3.2, and 5.8 aloud, highlighting how Brenda's interpretations bore no resemblance to what was actually written. Finally, I want to address the inspection that took place last Friday. During that inspection, Miss Montgomery and other board members took photos from areas of my property I did not give them access to. They claimed my recycling bin was visible through my garage window, and that lawn furniture stored on my side yard constitutes a violation, even though both are completely hidden from public view. I looked around the crowded room. This isn't about property values or community standards. This is about a board president who damaged my property and is now abusing her authority to avoid responsibility. I ask that the board dismiss all violation notices and direct Miss Montgomery to file a claim through proper insurance channels like any other resident would be required to do. I sat down to spontaneous applause from most of the audience. Brenda banged her gavel. Order. This is not a town hall. Mr. Thompson has had his say. Now the board will discuss the matter. Tom Wu spoke first. I've reviewed all the materials Kyle provided. The police report is crystal clear. Brenda, you were at fault for the accident. You can't fine someone for damage you caused. The violations are not about the accident, Brenda insisted. They are about his failure to maintain his property properly, which created the conditions for the accident. Brenda, he doesn't maintain the street. The city does. You know that. Section 4.7 requires property owners to prevent hazardous conditions on and around their properties. Derek jumped in. Brenda, we've been through this. Section 4.7 is about drainage and landscaping, not street maintenance. You're twisting the language to fit your narrative. Barbara raised her hand. I think we need to remember that property values affect all of us. If residents don't maintain safe conditions, we all suffer. Barbara, he did maintain his property, Tom said, exasperation creeping into his voice. His driveway and walkway were clear. The street is not his property. Linda spoke up. What about the disrespectful behavior? We cannot have residents treating board members with hostility. Marcus Chen stood up. If I may address the board, I'm Marcus Chen, attorney for Mr. Thompson. The alleged disrespect consists of him asking reasonable questions after his property was damaged. Furthermore, Illinois law protects residents from retaliation by HOAs. What's happening here appears to be a clear case of retaliation prohibited under the Illinois Common Interest Community Association Act. We don't need lectures from attorneys, Brenda snapped. Actually, you might want to listen to him, Tom said. Because if you continue down this path, this HOA is going to end up in court and we're going to lose. Then everyone's HOA fees will go up to pay for the judgment and legal fees. The room erupted with residents calling out their opinions. Several people shouted that Brenda should resign. Others defended her. The newspaper reporter was scribbling notes furiously. Brenda banged her gavel repeatedly. Order! The board will now vote on whether to uphold or dismiss the violations. All in favor of upholding the violations. Brenda raised her hand. Barbara and Linda raised theirs after a moment's hesitation. All opposed, Tom and Derek raised their hands. The violations are upheld by a vote of 3-2. Mr. Thompson, you now owe $1,750 in fines, plus $300 per day for each day after Friday that the fence remains unrepaired. The room exploded. Residents were shouting. Someone yelled shame. Several people pulled out their phones and started recording. The newspaper reporter looked like she had just won the lottery. Marcus stood up again. Let the record show that the board president who caused the damage to my client's property just voted to fine him for that damage. We will be filing suit in DuPage County Circuit Court within the week. Additionally, we will be requesting that the court order the HOA to pay Mr. Thompson's legal fees under the provisions of the Illinois Common Interest Community Association Act that allow for fee awards when an HOA acts in bad faith. Tom Wu stood up and removed his board member badge. I resign from this board effective immediately. I will not be part of this farce. He walked out, and about half the room followed him, including most of the people I recognized as being on my side. Brenda called after him, "You cannot resign in the middle of a meeting." "I just did," Tom shouted back. "You're on your own, Brenda. When this HOA gets sued into oblivion, don't expect any help from me." The meeting disintegrated from there. Derek tried to maintain order, but it was hopeless. Eventually, Brenda adjourned the meeting early, and the remaining residents dispersed into the parking lot where arguments continued. I found myself surrounded by supportive neighbors. Susan gave me a hug. Richard clapped me on the back. Marcus was already on his phone with his office, presumably drafting the lawsuit. "Kyle, I'm sorry it went this way," Derek said. "I really hoped Barbara or Linda would see reason. It's not your fault. You tried. For what it's worth, I think you're going to win this easily in court." Brenda has overplayed her hand badly. Over the next few days, the story exploded. The Naperville Sun published an article titled "HOA President Fines Homeowner for Fence She Destroyed." It included quotes from the police report, photos of the damaged fence, and a summary of the board meeting. The article went viral on social media. Within 24 hours, the story had been picked up by WGN News in Chicago. A reporter came to my house to interview me. I showed them the fence, the police report, and the violation notices. The segment aired that evening during prime time. A Naperville homeowner is fighting back against what he calls HOA abuse after the association's president crashed into his fence and then fined him for not preventing the accident. Kyle Thompson says he's being charged $300 per day for damaged property that the HOA president herself destroyed. The Meadowbrook Hills HOA has not returned our calls for comment. My phone rang constantly with interview requests. Good Morning America wanted me on their show. Local lawyers were calling to offer their services. Residents from other neighborhoods were emailing me their own HOA horror stories. Brenda went into hiding. Her social media accounts were deleted. She stopped attending neighborhood events. According to Susan, who heard it from Barbara's sister, Brenda was getting hundreds of angry messages per day from people who had seen the news coverage. On Monday, 1 week after the accident, the fence contractors arrived and began repairs. They worked efficiently, removing the damaged sections and installing new posts and panels. By the end of the day, my fence looked brand new. The total cost was $3,200, fully covered by Brenda's insurance company. I took extensive photos of the completed work and sent them to Marcus for the lawsuit file. That same day, I received a certified letter from the HOA. It was a bill for $1,750 in fines, plus $2,100 in daily fines for the 7 days between Friday and Monday when my fence was being repaired. Total due, $3,850. The letter stated that if payment was not received within 30 days, the HOA would place a lien on my property and potentially begin foreclosure proceedings. Marcus laughed when I showed him the bill. They just keep digging themselves deeper. This is perfect for our case. They're demanding payment for fines that arose from damage their president caused, and they're threatening foreclosure. Any judge is going to see this as outrageous overreach. He filed the lawsuit that Wednesday in DuPage County Circuit Court. The complaint alleged abuse of process, harassment, violation of the Illinois Common Interest Community Association Act, breach of fiduciary duty, and declaratory judgment that the fines were invalid and unenforceable. We sued both the HOA and Brenda personally in her capacity as president. The lawsuit requested that the court invalidate all fines, award damages for my legal fees and emotional distress, and issue an injunction preventing the HOA from taking any further enforcement action related to the accident. The day after the lawsuit was filed, I received a phone call from Linda Peterson. Kyle, this is Linda from the HOA board. I want you to know that I've resigned from the board effective immediately. I was stunned. Linda, I appreciate you telling me, but can I ask why? Because I've had a week to think about what happened at that meeting and I'm ashamed of how I acted. You were right. Brenda caused that accident and we had no business fining you for it. I let my loyalty to a friend override my common sense and my duty to the community. I'm sorry. Thank you for saying that. There's something else you should know. After Tom resigned, I started getting phone calls from other residents. Lots of them. People are furious about what happened to you, but they're also bringing up other things, violations that seemed unfair, fines that seemed excessive, interpretations of rules that made no sense. I went back through 2 years of board records, and I found a pattern. Brenda has been targeting people she has personal disputes with. Your situation is the most egregious, but you're not the only one. What are you going to do? I've compiled a report documenting everything I found. I'm sending it to the Illinois Attorney General's office and to the HOA's insurance company. If even half of what I found constitutes misconduct, Brenda should never be allowed to serve on an HOA board again. Linda, I have to say, this takes courage. It's the least I can do after voting to uphold those ridiculous fines. I hope you'll accept my apology. I do, thank you. 2 days later, Barbara resigned as well. That left Brenda as the only remaining board member, which meant the board no longer had a quorum to conduct official business. Under the HOA bylaws, when the board lacked a quorum, An emergency election had to be held within 60 days to fill the vacancies. Until then, only essential business like paying utility bills and maintaining common areas could be conducted. More importantly, the HOA could not issue new violations, assess new fines, or take enforcement actions without a properly constituted board. Brenda tried to appoint replacements to fill the vacant seats, but the bylaws required that board members be elected by residents, not appointed by other board members. Her attempts to claim emergency powers were rejected by the HOA's attorney, who apparently read the bylaws more carefully than Brenda did. March arrived, and with it came the response to our lawsuit. The HOA's insurance company had hired a law firm to defend the case. Their answer to the complaint admitted many of the basic facts, but argued that the HOA had broad discretion to interpret and enforce its covenants. However, they also filed a cross-claim against Brenda personally, arguing that if she had acted outside her authority or violated HOA rules, she was personally liable for any damages, not the HOA or its insurance policy. In other words, the HOA's own insurance company was throwing Brenda under the bus. The discovery process began. Marcus subpoenaed all HOA records related to my case, including emails and text messages between board members. What we found was damning. In a text exchange the day of the accident, Brenda had written to Barbara, "I need you to back me up on this. If I admit fault, my insurance rates will go through the roof. We need to find a way to make this Kyle's problem." Barbara had responded, "What do you want me to do?" Brenda, emergency board meeting. We issue violation notices today before he can lawyer up, make it expensive enough that he'll be desperate to settle. There were dozens of similar messages showing that Brenda knew she was at fault, but deliberately misused her authority as HOA president to shift blame and financial responsibility. Marcus filed a motion for summary judgment, arguing that the undisputed facts showed the fines were improperly assessed and unenforceable as a matter of law. The motion included the police report, the text messages, witness statements, and expert testimony from an HOA management specialist who stated that Brenda's actions violated every standard of proper HOA governance. The hearing on the motion was scheduled for May 15, 2026. Judge Patricia Walsh presided over the case in DuPage County Circuit Court. I sat in the courtroom with Marcus and Richard, who had come for moral support. Across the aisle, Brenda sat with the attorney her personal insurance company had hired. The HOA's attorneys sat at a separate table, making it clear they were not on Brenda's side. Judge Walsh reviewed the motion materials. "Counsel, I've read the briefs and reviewed the evidence. This seems fairly straightforward. Miss Montgomery crashed her vehicle into Mr. Thompson's fence and then used her position as HOA president to fine him for the damage she caused. Am I missing something?" The HOA's attorney stood. "Your Honor, the HOA Association wishes to make clear that it does not contest Mr. Thompson's motion. The board's actions in this case were not authorized by the HOA's governing documents and did not reflect the community's interests. The HOA asks the court to rule in Mr. Thompson's favor and to allocate any costs or damages to Miss Montgomery personally, as her actions exceeded her authority." Brenda's attorney stood up. "Your Honor, my client was acting in her capacity as HOA president. She believed she was enforcing the covenants as written." Judge Walsh looked skeptical. "Counsel, I've read the covenants. There is no reasonable interpretation of Section 4.7 that requires homeowners to maintain public streets. Your client is an educated person living in suburban Illinois. She knows how municipal services work. The police report indicates she was speeding on an icy street. The text messages between board members show she knew she was at fault, but wanted to shift financial responsibility. I'm not seeing a good faith interpretation of ambiguous rules. I'm seeing someone abusing their authority to avoid consequences. Your Honor, if I may, you may not. Here's my ruling. Summary judgment is granted in favor of Mr. Thompson. All fines assessed against him are hereby declared invalid and unenforceable. The HOA is permanently enjoined from attempting to collect said fines or placing any lien on Mr. Thompson's property related to this matter. As for damages, Mr. Thompson is entitled to recover his reasonable attorney fees, which I will determine after reviewing billing records. Additionally, I am awarding Mr. Thompson $10,000 in damages for harassment and emotional distress. Finally, I am referring this matter to the Illinois Attorney General's Office for investigation of potential violations of the Illinois Common Interest Community Association Act. She looked directly at Brenda. Miss Montgomery, you do not get to crash your car into someone's property and then fine them for it. Your conduct as HOA president was an abuse of your fiduciary duties and a violation of basic fairness. I strongly suggest you resign from any position of authority in your community and reflect on the harm you've caused. The gavel came down, and it was over. Outside the courthouse, Marcus shook my hand. That went about as well as it could have gone. We'll submit our fee records, but based on the hours I've billed, you're looking at around $15,000 in attorney fees that Brenda will have to pay on top of the $10,000 in damages. So she's going to owe me $25,000 total, plus the cost of your fence repairs, which her insurance already paid, but yes, and that's just your case. If the Attorney General finds she violated state law, there could be additional penalties and fines. Plus her insurance rates are going through the roof, and she'll probably be uninsurable after this. I felt a mix of relief and vindication. I had never wanted any of this. I just wanted to drink my coffee in peace and have my fence left alone. But Brenda had forced my hand, and now she was paying the price for her arrogance. The story of the court ruling made headlines again. Judge rules against HOA president who fined homeowner for fence she destroyed, ran in papers throughout Illinois, and was picked up nationally. The Meadowbrook Hills HOA held an emergency election in early June. Over 90% of residents voted, a record turnout. Derek was elected president. Richard Chen, Susan Martinez, and 2 other neighbors who had supported me were elected to the other board positions. Their first official act was to review and revise the HOA's enforcement policies to prevent future abuse. They established an appeals committee made up of residents rather than board members. They required recusal when board members had conflicts of interest. They limited fine amounts and eliminated daily fines for issues requiring reasonable time to resolve. Their second act was to issue a formal apology to me on behalf of the HOA and to reimburse me the $500 I had initially paid before filing suit, just to show good faith. Brenda never paid the judgment voluntarily. Marcus had to file for wage garnishment, and we eventually collected the full amount plus interest. She moved out of Meadowbrook Hills in August, selling her house at a loss because she needed to relocate quickly. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved to a condo in downtown Chicago, a building with no HOA. The Illinois Attorney General's investigation concluded in September. They found that Brenda had violated multiple provisions of the Illinois Common Interest Community Association Act, including the duty of good faith and fair dealing, the prohibition on self-dealing, and the requirement to act in the community's best interests. She was barred from serving on any HOA board in Illinois for 10 years and ordered to pay a $5,000 civil penalty. As for me, life gradually returned to normal. My fence remained standing and undamaged. My insurance rates did not go up. I no longer received violation notices for phantom infractions. The new HOA board was reasonable and focused on actual community issues rather than petty enforcement of nitpicky rules. They used HOA funds to improve playground equipment and organize neighborhood events instead of hiring extra inspection companies. I did end up doing something Brenda had accused me of doing but never actually did. The following February, I bought a bag of salt and sprinkled it on the sidewalk in front of my house. Not because I had to, but because it seemed like a nice thing to do for my neighbors. Richard saw me doing it and came over with his own bag of salt. Need some help? Sure. We salted the entire block together, laughing about the absurdity of the previous year. You know what the best part is? Richard said. Brenda created this whole mess trying to save a few $100s on her insurance deductible, and it ended up costing her tens of thousands of dollars and her reputation. Pride comes before a fall, I guess. Hey, at least you got a good story out of it. I looked at my fence, standing straight and strong. I thought about that morning when I was drinking coffee and heard the crash. At the time, I had no idea how much my life was about to change. But I had learned something valuable. Standing up to bullies, even institutional ones, is worth it. The neighborhood was better for it. Residents felt more comfortable in their own homes, not constantly worried about violation notices for trivial infractions. Property values actually increased because people wanted to live in a community with reasonable governance rather than a dictatorship. And I learned that communities are only as good as the people who run them. When reasonable people get involved and hold leaders accountable, systems work. When reasonable people stay silent and let petty tyrants take control, everyone suffers. Every time I pulled into my driveway and saw that fence, I remembered the lesson. Not just about HOAs or Karens or legal battles, but about the importance of standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. The fence, rebuilt and stronger than before, stood as a monument to justice. Well, that and to the fact that you should probably slow down when driving on icy roads in February. But mostly justice. One evening in November, almost 2 years after the accident, I was sitting on my porch enjoying the last warm day before winter set in. A moving truck pulled up to Brenda's old house, which had finally sold after sitting empty for months. A young couple got out, looking excited and nervous the way first-time homebuyers do. They waved at me and I waved back. The husband walked over. "Hi, we're Mark and Jennifer Paulson. We just bought this place, looking forward to being neighbors. Welcome to Meadowbrook Hills. I'm Kyle Thompson." "Thanks. Hey, someone at the closing mentioned there was some drama with the HOA a while back. Something about the former owner," I smiled. "Let's just say the HOA has new management now and things are much better." "Oh, good. We were a little worried. You know how HOAs can be." "I do, but you'll be fine. The current board is great. Reasonable people focused on actual community issues." Mark looked relieved. "That's great to hear." "Hey, is there anything we should know about the neighborhood?" I thought about it for a moment. "Just one thing. During the winter, make sure you salt your sidewalk. It's just good neighborly conduct." "Will do. Thanks for the advice." As they walked back to their moving truck, I thought about how much had changed in 2 years. A neighborhood divided had come together. A tyrant had been dethroned. And I had learned that sometimes the best response to injustice is simply to stand your ground and let the truth speak for itself. I finished my coffee and went inside, looking forward to a quiet evening. No crashes, no violation notices, no court dates. Just a regular Tuesday in a neighborhood that had finally found its balance. And my fence, sturdy and whole, stood guard through another peaceful night.